We live in a world where the concept of fairness has been nearly elevated to an extent of being worshipped. If you've ever lived with children, if you've ever worked with children on a regular basis, then you'll recognize and you know that so many squabbles, so many fights erupt from this very old emotion of feeling somehow slighted or mistreated, that somehow it's been unfair. No fair! How come he got more ice cream than I did? Why does she get to stay up so late? I used to say that all the time when I was a kid. You know what my bedtime was? My curfew until I was 12 was 7 p.m. And because I had older siblings, of course they got to stay up later, and it was very unfair, don't you think? Why does she get to sit in the front seat? I'm big enough to sit in the front seat now, aren't I? It's not fair. Why is Sally's curfew 1:30 in the morning and I have to be home by 10:30? It's not fair. It's almost reached the point that if you're going to continue having any sort of relationship with children, your own children or grandchildren or even great-grandchildren, then you might want to consider enrolling in law school. Because a caregiver needs the wisdom of a judge and the memory of an elephant. Wisdom to hand down rulings on the moment's notice whenever that arises, it's not fair. And a great memory that can recall all the incidents in the past and make the best decision for all parties involved. Well, if you think this obsession with fairness is new, think again. It's as old as Eden. It's so deeply embedded in our collective bones that most people take this sense of unfairness with us to the grave. I've seen, and I'm sure you probably have as well, seen adult children who get into a fight in the checkout line at the store because somebody butted in. And it's not fair. I've waited here all this time. How dare you cut in front of me? I've seen loving family members get into a fight that lasts for too long after a funeral because of what's coming to me from the estate. And you better make sure that it's all divvied up the way I see that it should be divvied up, which is the best, fairest way for me. Well, you might say that that would never happen to you. Oh, I never do something like that. Well, keep track of how many times a day you feel slighted this week. How many times a day this week you feel unfairly done by. And how often you want to immediately argue your case to the other people. On day one of our vacation Bible school, just started almost 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. Oh my goodness. The children learned that when life is unfair... Awesome! Next slide, please, Emmy. Adult fish in a little bowl is just not fair. Well, next time you find yourself saying it's not fair. According to the dictionary, the word prodigal is an adjective that means recklessly wasteful or wastefully extravagant. Just throwing it all out, wasting it. Prodigal is derived from the Latin word prodigere, which is translated as a verb to squander. A prodigal son, a prodigal child, is one that is a wasteful child. one who throws away opportunities recklessly and wastefully, one that gets rid of anything and everything regardless. The younger son in this famous parable is a waster, one of the most famous rogues, if you will, in the entire Bible. And in our soap opera imaginations, we can read between the lines and we can fill in the blanks of all the sordid ways that he must have wasted his inheritance in the distant country. He takes his money, it says, and blows it on wild living. The story doesn't actually go into detail here about what such wild living entails. But the elder brother reveals to us how quickly our minds extrapolate as to what exactly this wild living constitutes. Imagine a young man with his pockets full of money going off to a distant land, and we can imagine what he might be tempted to spend all that money on. In 1636, the artist Rembrandt painted a suggestive portrait of a jaunty, saucy, debonair prodigal with a pencil-thin mustache, dressed in the attire of the day, wearing a hat with enough plumage to take flight, while he's hoisting up a glass of beer that's well over 2 feet tall. And in his lap is a young lady enjoying the fun, while in the original painting, there's another lady with no clothing on who's sitting there playing the mandolin in entertainment. The great painter, Rembrandt, used himself, he wrote about it, and his wife, Saskia, as the models for that particular canvas, which might suggest to us more than we'd like to realize how parables are designed to work. We know this story well, don't you? Maybe that's part of the problem. We're not sure right now whether our dog, who is 12 years old, whether he's actually mostly deaf, or he's just become so accustomed to us that he just totally chooses to not pay attention to our voices. We like to think that he's mostly deaf right now. How many of us have a hearing issue? You remember I told you a couple of months ago, was it, Emmy, a few months ago, that I went to have my hearing tested? And the audiologist said that I had the most perfect hearing of the day. I had to go and get my hearing tested again somewhere else because it's really not that perfect. And discovered, and this is my excuse and this is my story and I'm standing by it, that it's not hearing that's the problem. You know what it is? It's the brainstem, she said. That it gets all jumbled up in the brainstem, and so my brain doesn't know what to focus on, and so I just focus on nothing. I was told that. It's official. I have it in writing as well. So there you go. Part of the problem is this story is so familiar that we don't listen to it very much anymore. We know all about the prodigal son, this wasteful son. We also know that so many families usually have a prodigal kid in the family. What we don't know, our imaginations are more than willing to fill in the gaps. We know all about the father too, who takes back his rogue of a son even before the son's confession is completely out of his mouth. He takes him back, he runs across the field and smothers his son with hugs and kisses and a robe and a ring and a huge party. Come to think of it, many people have called this father a prodigal father as well, with the root definition being wasteful, a waster. Who would spend so much, so foolishly, especially on somebody who clearly didn't deserve it? What a waste this father has just done. Maybe. If you or I have a bit of a wild past, now grateful to be welcomed back, taken back in, to be forgiven? My guess is that we would probably identify most with the older brother in this story. Jesus definitely wants his listeners to see the folly in the older brother's behavior. But, darn it all, put yourself in his shoes, eh? I mean, come on. What has this older brother been doing? When I was a kid, I'm going to answer that for you by telling you a story. When I was a kid, because I haven't been in the pulpit for a week, so I've got lots of time to catch up on. When I was a kid, we all had chores. There were 5 of us kids. My little sister didn't have any chores because she was the baby of the family. And my parents treated us unfairly in light of her. And so the 4 of us, the 4 older kids, had all these chores to do. And my chore was I had to vacuum the basement. I'm really good at vacuuming, by the way. I had to vacuum the basement and vacuum the stairs, and I did it so well. And I cleaned so well that my older brothers, who also had to vacuum places, they used to bug me and they used to do things to me so that I had to do their chores too, because I did them better. And that meant that I was working what? More. Not only my own chores, but their chores also. Are you feeling sorry for me yet? No, of course not. It just wasn't fair. What was the older brother doing? His work and his younger brother's work, if you think about it. Who picked up the slack? Me. Right on. I mean, it's just so not fair, is it? The older brother had to do even more work. In short, he's been working his off the whole day. Make that the whole month. Make that for as long as his younger rogue of a brother, if you can call him a brother still, has been out of the country, celebrating, partying, doing whatever he pleases. He's exhausted now, this older brother. His boots probably smell of cow manure, and he's probably got all sorts of filth all over him from working in the fields as well, and he could use a good shower. And as he's coming home, he hears it. The music. That was your cue to play some music. Okay, sorry, I didn't fill you in on that beforehand. Okay, well, next time. Music. The younger brother hears music. And there's dancing with the music. And the intriguing thing about this word for music in this parable, the Greek word is symphonia, from which we get our English word, symphony. The older brother comes home and he doesn't hear just a guitar or a mandolin or a drum. He hears a symphony. There's a whole band here playing to celebrate, a veritable orchestra of merriment. And so he asks, what on earth is going on? Befuddlement is not the correct word to describe the older brother's reaction. He knows the old man doesn't throw parties in the middle of the week. Someone finally breaks the news to this older brother. Oh, your younger brother's back, and your dad is celebrating with a party because he's so happy to have him home. Too much to bear. Robe, ring, fatted calf, and an unbelievably excessive trinity of welcome for somebody who has been a royal jerk to his dad. Father, said the younger son, give me my share of the estate that will belong to me, said the younger son when he left. Do you know what he was saying? He was asking his dad, and woe be unto me if I ever suggested this to my parents. He was asking his dad to execute the will before he had died. He was in essence, on one hand, saying, drop dead, Dad, and give me what I've got coming to me of the estate. We'd never dream of saying that, would we? But we do it in different ways. So tell the truth. Had you been in the older brother's shoes, working double shifts while that younger rascal of a brother of yours lived it up, would you have gone into the party and say, "Hey, great to see you, little brother. Welcome home"? Would you? Maybe. Maybe not. What about a tongue lashing? Would you give him a tongue lashing? Oh, yeah. How about some clearly defined ways to make up for all the heartache and do extra chores for me now? Yeah, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? What about establishing a definite, long, visible period of remorse where the younger brother has to go about mourning, grieving horribly for his sins until the older brother said, "All right, that's almost enough"? That sounds pretty good. Would we ever do that? But a party? Would you go in and celebrate at a party? Be honest. There's something primitive and basic humanly here afoot that tweaks our sense of moral outrage. And I'll tell you why we probably would not have, on the one hand, gone into the party. Because it's just not fair. But the other hand, we'd end up going into the party because our tummies are really empty. And we want to have some of that fresh barbecued beef that Dad's offering. There are a lot of theological nuggets to mine out of this parable. But perhaps one of the most basic nuggets is this. Sorry to break it to you. God is not fair. God doesn't play by our rules. God doesn't see life the way we see it. God doesn't keep score, but we keep score, don't we? God isn't fair the way we wish He were fair. And if we're honest, we're not too happy about that. Because so much of our energy in our lifetime is spent on things that are unfair and wanting to get our way. God isn't fair. Not only that, it appears that God has an ongoing love affair with sinners, and of the most horrible kind as well, like this younger brother. Throws a party of rich food and drinks to celebrate them. He invites the undeserving. He dances with those people that we would say aren't even worthy of being near the home, let alone on the dance floor. He slips a ring on his finger. This God does. Curious word, ring. It appears here and one other place in the New Testament with the implication that God in Christ is wearing a ring and puts a ring on our finger, that we are wedded to God through Jesus. Wow, you mean God wants to marry us, sinners? Yes, that's what it's like. So let's step back outside for a moment with the older brother, still in need of a shower, arms folded across his chest because it's just not is it? It's just not fair. The older brother's taken the moral high road. When this son of yours, did you ever notice if you had kids, when one of them misbehaved, they became your spouse's kid? Your kid. Well, this older brother says it beautifully here. When this son of yours, didn't call him my brother, when this son of yours came back, you killed the fatted calf for him. Can't even bring to acknowledge that this younger son of his father is actually family. Can't even acknowledge him by calling him by name. A sense of unfairness, you know, can turn poisonous, venomous, rather quickly in our lives. So where are we at the parable's end? Are we inside the party celebrating? Are we standing out in the field still, a little bit away from the house, arms folded, refusing to come in? Jesus doesn't tell us how the story ends. But he does tell us that the father went outside and passionately pleaded with the older son to come in to the party. Pleads with him to join the welcome celebration. We're never told what the older brother does, do we? The story ends. But it doesn't end if we're listening to it every day. Will we RSVP to a party thrown by this unfair God? Or will we stubbornly remain outside? In a world where God doesn't play the sort of fairness that we want, and yet God is absolutely just and gracious. And as this story, this parable reminds us, God calls us to make a choice. Who's the real prodigal here? Who's the real waster? From the beginning, Jesus said that this story is about two brothers. Which one is the real prodigal? The younger one who went and wasted everything and then came home? Or the older one who had everything and wasted relationship by refusing to go in? Or is it the father who is actually the prodigal? Which one? The father's extravagant, seemingly unfair, wasteful love, lavished on the younger son. It'd be intriguing and yet frightening, I think, if we were ever to take stock of our lives and how much we've kept score with people in our lives and how much we've complained about unfairness. We can harbor grudges to the grave. We can completely misunderstand what Jesus is all about, even as we gather week by week to worship him, even as we worship him daily in our own homes. We can waste life waiting for apologies, waiting for people to act decently and fairly, waiting for others to earn our forgiveness and acceptance, and forgetting and not realizing that Jesus waited on none of those things for us. Do you remember what the words were that Jesus called out when they nailed him to the cross? And when they pushed the crown of thorns on his head and the blood flowed down from all over him? Ah, suckers! You're going to get yours, you know. No. What did he say? Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing. What a lavish, wonderfully unwasteful love from the Father. Every Sunday, every day, God throws a party for sinners. And some of us may have been recently in a strange, faraway country and making our ways back home. And others, perhaps, our whole lives. We've been working, slaving it out hard in the fields of the Lord for years. And maybe we slip into a Christianity that is more about controlling God and God's love, and in light of our sense of fairness, than celebrating God's love for all. An orchestra of voices, a symphonia, a communion of saints calls one and all to the same table, the same celebration, the same party of God. The judge of the world presides, and he welcomes us with open arms. But let me warn you, God's not fair in light of our understanding of fairness. God doesn't play favorites, but he clearly likes to celebrate and throw a party. So who is the real prodigal? And do we move back and forth between one type of prodigal, younger brother, and the older son type of prodigal? Who's the prodigal still? The one who can't bring himself or herself to forgive. This son of yours was dead, But the father said, this brother of yours, he was dead, and he's now back to life. He was lost, and he's now found. Please, you've got to come in and celebrate. The one that we usually call the prodigal is alive. And he's overwhelmed with life. He's found. And that means the dead one, the lost one, is the one who continues to stubbornly choose to remain outside of the Father's party. Which is more wasteful? I, for one, am very thankful that God doesn't consider it wasteful to pour his gracious love into my life and ours.